Hey everyone, I am your astrologer Wonder Girl, taking you to new heights. This is your astrology horoscope for the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, which happens on Thursday, June 10th, 2021 at 6:52 a.m. Eastern time or 3:52 a.m. Pacific time, depending upon which part of really the country, the United States, that you're in. Although I know I do have plenty of people that watch me elsewhere as well. And thank you for that. Now, what I think this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is really all about is about us being in the middle of some old conflicts with some old things and old people from the past that haven't fully been resolved. And it's about us doing a lot of thinking and talking about those conflicts so that we can get a brand new perspective on these old things that actually helps us to fix them, that actually helps us to finally fix them, get closure from those old things and move on. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. In my opinion, this new moon solar eclipse is so simple, it's complicated. It's so simple, it's complicated. So hang in there as we go through this, which I'm going to start talking about now. Before I talk about the eclipse in particulars, the specifics though, I am going to place it on the chart just so that you can see it and follow along with me. So I'm going to do that now. A new moon does consist of the moon and the sun. So we're going to look at that. Here's the moon in this chart, and is at the exact same degree and the exact same sign as the sun, 19 degrees Gemini, which makes it a new moon. Okay, I know that this is a solar eclipse as well because we've got the moon and the sun here fairly close to this little thing, this horseshoe, the north node. Okay, and this north node basically determines what an eclipse is. It's the point in space where the sun, the moon, and the earth all align. So whenever you have the sun and the moon here near this point where everything aligns, you get an eclipse. Okay. Which happens about twice a year that you'll get eclipses. Okay, so what is all this about? Well, new moons, I'll start there, are about new beginnings and fresh starts, and they bring new energy of some sort to put our focus or our attention in some area of life that maybe we haven't been focusing or putting attention on. An eclipse here superpowers this new moon, this new start, this new energy, and this fresh beginning to really maximize it and take it to a really insanely big degree. Okay, because solar eclipses do maximize new moons. I should also note solar eclipses do tend to have staying power. They aren't just around, their impacts aren't just around for a few days or a few weeks or all of that. Their impacts tend to be around much longer. We're talking now 6 months to many years now after this point, especially 9 years until the eclipses, until the nodes come back to Gemini and Sagittarius the opposite way around. So this is a pretty big deal. Not only is this a big deal because it's an eclipse and eclipses have staying power, but it's also a big deal because this is the first eclipse, solar eclipse that we've had in Gemini on the north node. That matters if it's on the north or the south node in 18 years. So even though the nodes have been in Gemini and Sagittarius for about 1.5 years now. So this is a really, really big deal. Not only is what's going to happen now going to really set the tone for the next 6 months and possibly 9 years of our lives, but what happens now is so drastically different than anything that I think we've been experiencing, especially for the past 18 years. So this is a big deal, bringing a lot of fresh energy we haven't felt in a long time before, and a really big adjustment, transition, change in order for us to move forward. Now, what is this? What is this big deal that I'm talking about that's going to be with us for a while? Well, Gemini, right? Because the new moon solar eclipse is in Gemini. What is Gemini about? Well, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication, which has to do with the way that we think and the way that we talk to other people. So what this means is that at this new moon solar eclipse, we are getting a drastically new and very different way of thinking about ourselves, which includes our past, our present, and our future, and talking about that as well. A drastically different way of thinking and talking about these things that we haven't had in about 18 years. And that's going to be with us again for quite some time. Another way to put that, it's kind of a synonym, but maybe it'll hit you all differently, is a perspective. We're getting not only a new way of thinking and talking, but a drastically new perspective on our lives. It's like we're putting on glasses that are a different color than what we've had before. We're just seeing things so differently, or starting to see, or need to see them very differently than we have. Okay, another thing about Gemini as well is that it is a mutable sign. It's a mutable sign. It's very, very flexible. It's lighthearted. It's loose as well. Being a mutable sign, being air flows. It flows. So not only are we now getting a huge boost and a huge start to think drastically different than we have in a long time and communicate as a result of our different perspective drastically differently, but we're also getting a big boost as well to loosen up, to not be so tight, to not have your panties in a wad all the time, and to loosen up as you think about these things and communicate about these things, and to have a more flexible perspective, a more flexible mindset that doesn't mind going with the flow and having some fun, you know, and kind of letting its guard down every once in a while as well. Okay. So that's what I think is going on here. Not just, maybe I should make this clear, not just a new way of thinking and talking, a drastically new perspective and way of seeing things, but a new perspective. It's specific, a new perspective that is more flexible, that is more open, that is more go with the flow, that is more lighthearted. That's what we are stepping into. Again, not just now, but for 6 months to 9 years from now, more of this kind of energy. Okay, because I do think, maybe I should compare and contrast for a minute. I know I'm diving right in. I do think the past few years, 9 to 18 years of our lives have been a bit stiff. They've been a bit stiff. They've been serious, stiff and serious, because we've had Saturn here in Capricorn, and which is a stiff, right? And it's Saturn ruled Earth sign. We had it in Scorpio, which is very intense. Both these signs, which do not get along with Gemini because they both quincunx it. So I think the past 9 years at least have been very stiff, very serious about a lot of things, very deep, very intense emotionally about all these things from the past that haven't gone on. And this is the end of that. This new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is like, loosen up, you know, like have some fun. Life should be fun. Like, you know, stop being so emotional, stop being so serious, stop being so caught up in all this other stuff, and just like, let the good times roll, man, and go with it. Okay, that's what I think is starting to go here, and that we're trying to learn. Okay, so that's it. Now, before I move forward to explain more about this new moon solar eclipse, I do just want to go backwards a little bit in order to give you more of the context here of why this is now coming up, and of why this is important, and of how this has happened. Okay, and to do that, I'm actually going to go back to the last solar eclipse, right? That would make sense, that we had about 6 months ago now, in Sagittarius, the middle of December, the last degrees of Sagittarius, right about here. Okay, what was that about? Well, that was a new moon solar eclipse that started a cycle in December. What cycle did that start? That started a cycle for us to step more fully into Sagittarius, a new and different chapter of life that's ideally better, with Sagittarius being a Jupiter ruled sign. That's ideally better than what we have experienced for many, many, many years prior in some way, shape, or form. A new chapter in life that is meant to be with us also for a while. Okay, but even though in December of last year, we stepped into, I think, a new and better chapter of life, different from what we'd experienced in the past. We had some roadblocks fully embracing that new chapter in life and seeing it for what it really was and accepting it. What were those roadblocks? Well, that to me was the new moon in Capricorn, the middle to end of January, and the new moon in Aquarius, the middle to end of February, because both of these new moons were very difficult. Preventing challenges to the new life. What were those difficulties? In my opinion, a lot of these difficulties were not external factors. A lot of these difficulties were internal. A lack of a positive belief system, a lack of a positive belief system, and us being stuck in self-sabotaging tendencies, feelings of victimization, low self-esteem as well. If not that, it could have been an over-attachment to an old identity. That was also part of our problems. Addictions, That could have also been an issue, and old things in our life that were kind of gone, but that we hadn't owned up to fully kick out of our lives and get rid of and move forward on. Okay, hard. But even though January, the end of January and the end of February was hard, I do believe that by the time we got to the middle of March, at that new moon in Pisces, right about here, things started to improve. In the middle of March, at that new moon in Pisces, we finally started to realize what was going on here and make steps to more fully overcome these roadblocks and to heal them, to heal the low confidence, the not healthy beliefs, and to kick these old things out of our lives that we don't need. Okay, and because we finally in March found it within us to get rid of this stuff, we then in April of this year, what is it, 2021, at that new moon in Aries, the middle of April, finally, we're able to more fully embrace this new chapter in life that arrived in December, and to see it take more full form in a tangible way in our environment and in our reality, so that we can actually live it, so that we can actually live the new chapter in life without sabotaging it and stopping it from happening. Okay, that occurred then. And because we were finally in the new chapter in life in a more tangible way in April, we then in May, last month at the last new moon here in Taurus, started to try to sustain this new chapter in life that now was arriving in a more physical and tangible way. We were trying to sustain it so that it would last the test of time, and so that it would be more stable and more solid in the ways that it is that we needed. But as we started to sustain this new and better chapter in life in May, I think we realized that something was still not right, especially around that full moon lunar eclipse here in Sagittarius, which happened 2 weeks before this. We realized that something was not right, preventing us from fully completing the setting up of the new chapter. What did we realize was not right? Mercury retrograde square Neptune. We realized it was something from the past that had not fully been done correctly in the way that it is that it needed in order for us to move forward. Something from the past that either wasn't ended properly in the way that it needed, or wasn't began properly in the way that it needed, preventing us from moving forward. And to me, it was an old thing that possibly correlated to January and February of this year, although it could also span time periods before that as well. Okay, and because there was something from the past that hadn't fully been ended correctly, changed correctly, we then, since the 2 weeks ago, have been going back to the past here in order to fix these old things, to rework them, and to move them onwards. Okay, but if I can be honest, I don't believe over the course of the past 2 weeks we've had the success that we hoped for to resolve these old things from the past. I don't believe that we have had this success. Some of us haven't even had the courage to face these old things. We've still been ignoring them, avoiding them, not going back, not fixing them, or we have been going back to fix them, but only halfway. We've been scared to fully fix everything, or we've been going back to fix everything and getting triggered by every damn thing that someone says or did from the past. You know, that's going on here. That's been really, really hard. Okay, it just hasn't been working out. And this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is saying, come on, get with it. This problem from the past, especially because the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is conjunct Mercury retrograde, square Neptune, square this whole thing that's been going on. This new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is saying, come on, this old problem from the past, you can't ignore it. You can't pretend it didn't happen. You can't be triggered by every little thing all the time. You know, you gotta finish it. You gotta finish this old thing from the past. You gotta finish cutting this old thing out of your life, changing this old thing, or starting the old thing that was never fully started. You have to do it if you ever want closure. If you ever really want old closure from an old chapter in life and to move forward. And the way that you need to do it to resolve these old things is to think and talk about it with these people and the stuff that you're dealing with, and think and talk about it in a drastically different way than you were before, because the old problems can't be solved with the old mindset. You need a new mindset to solve the old problems, okay? You need to go back to resolve these old things drastically differently than you would before, a different way of thinking and a different way of talking about it, and a way of thinking and talking that is Gemini air sign, less emotional, not offended easily by what happened, and is more lighthearted and more playful about whatever went on, and more flexible now to make the adjustments that you need in order to move forward. Okay. So that's it. I know I kind of brought a lot of things together, but I think that's probably the easiest way to explain it, because it was a lot. I'm not just going to repeat all of those things one more time. What I think is going on for this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini here is that we're feeling stuck in some old things in life that haven't been fully resolved, that are preventing us from moving forward into a new chapter in life. And we're trying to get a drastically different way of thinking and talking about these old challenges and old issues, and one that's more flexible, one that's more lighthearted, one that's more playful, and one that's really not offended that easily, so that we can more fully fix these things that need fixing, close out one old cycle in life, and finally step into another one in the ways that it is that we need. Okay. So that's that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a little bit more of the specifics about this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, even though I think I did a pretty good job here at tying everything in that I needed to tie in, but I'm going to say a few things now. I think the first thing that I want to say here is that I maybe made that sound kind of easy. I maybe made that sound kind of easy, but this can be a bit difficult to get this new perspective and this new way of thinking about things that is more chill, that is more chill, and that is more cerebral, and that's not as emotional. Why? Because of the time of this eclipse, Mercury is still retrograde and it's square Neptune here, which is a challenge. A square is hard. Neptune, especially with Mercury, is a challenge. It's also hard too because you've got Mars here in Cancer at the last degree, which is very intense. The last degree of a sign, especially because Mars doesn't like to be in Cancer. And we've got Mars opposite Pluto. I mean, this is not a good alignment here. And we've got Venus and Cancer, like coming into a square to Chiron in Aries. Like all these things are very hard. So even though I made it sound really simple, like just go back to these old issues and like fix them, think differently about it, talk different, don't get so hurt about all this old stuff. Don't take it so seriously, even though it sounds really easy, like there is a lot of challenges surrounding that. And I feel like they're mostly emotional challenges that we are all dealing with as individuals about doing that. What are the emotional challenges? The emotional challenges are that like we're very sensitive, right? Like Neptune and Pisces is very sensitive, especially Mars, the last degree of Cancer, opposite Pluto here. We're very sensitive and we're very hurt about these old things, these old things that happened to us, months and years ago, even though they're no longer around. So there's a part of us that like knows we need to think differently about this, or maybe even wants to talk differently about it, but still feels very beholden to the past. Like, is the past going to repeat itself? Like, is this old person, if I go back to fix this thing, are they going to screw me over again? Or are they going to screw me over just like the last person screwed me over? Like there's like all these feelings that are going on here. And like, that's happening with that. And not only are there a lot of feelings about like maybe the past is going to repeat and I haven't moved fully on from the past, but there's this feeling of like still being burned and all the emotions of the past like being kind of fresh still, even though I think we've done a lot of work to heal them too. That can be a bit hard and make us feel very like with the Chiron influence vulnerable, like and sensitive here, and very like raw and wounded, But that's the thing, you don't need a new perspective to handle conflict and you don't need this many planets in Gemini in a solar eclipse to give you a new perspective if the new perspective is easy to get, right? Like if it was easy to go back to these old things and to do them differently, like you wouldn't need a solar eclipse in the sign, right? I mean, you wouldn't need the sun Mercury retrograde in the sign, so the fact that it's hard for us to get this new perspective and that we're still so emotional and so triggered about old things, to me is more proof that we actually need it, is more proof like why a new way of thinking and talking about old conflicts is so necessary now more than ever, in order for us to move forward. Okay. Yeah. Very, very hard. And I think because we're so triggered, like we're trying to come out of these old things, but we're still kind of emotionally stuck in them. I don't think we're physically stuck in them. I think we're just emotionally stuck in them. Because of that, I think it's going to require, do I want to say extreme transparency? Because the Chiron influence will do that in Aries. It's going to require, as we work through these old conflicts, extreme transparency with ourselves and with other people here on what's going on, and vulnerability as well. You know, because the message here about this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is not to forget these old things, right? It's not to say, oh, these old things, I can't resolve them. Let me just forget resolving the old things and move on or stay stuck. Like the message of this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is, no, you have to resolve these old things if you want closure. If you don't want closure, you don't have to resolve them. If you want closure so that you can move on, you have to resolve them, okay? And the way to resolve them is not to stay emotional. It's not to stay emotional. Gemini is not an emotional sign. It's to calm the emotions here, even if they're very intense, and have extreme transparency and vulnerability about what is going on with yourself and with the other people that are involved, so that you can forge your way into this new thought process and into this new perspective in order for you to move forward. So I think that that's a lot of what's going on. Maybe just to repeat that before I now talk about a whole bunch of other alignments together, is this: we're trying to forge our way into a new way of thinking and talking about old conflicts so that we can resolve them more fully and we can resolve them better than we have before, because whatever we have been doing hasn't been working. Okay, getting this new way of thinking and talking to resolve these old conflicts that's more flexible and that's lighter is actually a challenge, though, to get, even though we know we need it. It's a challenge to get this different perspective because we're still highly emotional about a lot of old things and about the past repeating itself and about whatever is going on, and still very hurt by these old things too. And the lesson of this new moon is not to stay stuck in the hurt and to avoid doing what needs to be done to resolve this old stuff, and to avoid having the thoughts and the conversations, but to have the thoughts and the conversations anyway, and to have them in a very different way than we would, and to be extremely transparent about our process and about what's been going on and vulnerable in the process as we bring things together, because that's what's then going to loosen us up here to be lighter once we get everything off our chest, once we unburden ourselves from all this past stuff, and to fix these things that need fixing, if they can be fixed, you know, and in what way. Okay. So I think that's that. Another note too that I want to say from this that just came to me is, like, once you say these things that you need to say, even if they're uncomfortable, like, things are going to get easier. It's like a weight is going to be lifted off your shoulders. So there's no need to be scared about saying things. Like once you say them, you're going to feel better. I do get that sense. Okay. Another thing too that I want to say from all of this as well is that there's a need to not only like just get things off of your chest and to communicate in a different way, one that's lighter, one that's more transparent, one that's more vulnerable, but there's also like a need as well to be less attached to the outcome, if you will, and to be open to many different ways that things can get resolved, right? Like Gemini, again, is very non-committal. It's a non-committal sign, being an air sign, okay? And being mutable. Okay, and not only is Gemini a bit non-committal because it's mutable, it's flexible, it's air, but it also is open to doing things differently. I mean, it's the third sign of the zodiac. Threes, you know, now indicate choices and possibilities and things that are opening to you and different paths you could take. Especially as well with Gemini being ruled by the twins, you know, which is two things. So you have to realize now that. So another thing, I guess, that we're trying to realize here is not only that we need to think and talk differently about these old things in order to actually resolve them and to keep communicating about them and to do it in a different way that is more vulnerable and just more loose, but we're also learning as well to not be so attached to the outcome, right? There are many different ways to to skin a cat. There's many different ways to fix a problem. There's many different ways to get closure. There's many different ways to, there's a need to stop focusing on one thing. I can only be happy if. This can only work out if. I'll only forgive you if. You do this, it's like, no, what is this? What is this? I'll only do this thing. What is that? This is Gemini. This is Gemini. Gemini said multiple ways here for forgiveness. There's multiple ways to fix something. There's multiple ways to get closure. There's multiple ways to move on, right? Like there needs to be more openness as well to resolutions and ways of moving forward, even if it's not like originally what you expected it to be in order to move forward. Okay, so there's that. Okay, and I think that once we can do that, once we can like go back to these old things and resolve them in a very different way, with a very different way of thinking that's more without the emotions as much, in a way that's more vulnerable and transparent and lighthearted and flexible and open about how things come together, I think that's going to be positive. I think it's going to be positive here. Why? Because the sun is conjunct Mercury as well. I mean, at the same time that this new moon is happening, and when the sun conjuncts Mercury, especially its retrograde, it does, in my opinion, bring something to light. The sun is the light. The light is bright. It's very bright. It's the center of the universe. Mercury comes back to it. It illuminates something here that was missing, the missing piece that we need from our new chapter in life to bring it forward. It's going to illuminate something that we've been missing, not only because the sun just does that a lot of times when it touches planets, but because this is what Mercury wanted. The reason why Mercury goes retrograde is because it gets too far away from the sun and it needs to come back. It needs to come back to the sun to get the messages and the answers and stuff that it needs. So that's another reason why it's good. Another reason why this is good too is because this marks the halfway period of Mercury retrograde when it conjuncts the sun. It's almost over now and we're coming off of it. So once we can get this through our heads here, that old conflicts can be resolved, although they do require a much different mindset that's less emotional. Once we get this through our head here, I think we get a lot more illumination here about answers we've been missing, about things we've been missing, about our next steps, about what needs to happen here in a lot of ways that helps us to get these old conflicts on a much better footing and on a much even better trajectory here in order to resolve them, especially over the course of the next 2 weeks until the next full moon in Capricorn. Okay. So I do like it. I also like it as well because this new moon here is in a solar eclipse, is in a sextile to Chiron and Aries as well. So not only is us like forging our way into a different style of thinking and talking here going to help us get the answers we need to resolve these old situations and illuminate some things here to get the old situations now in a better trajectory, but it's also as well going to help us heal some more things. Chiron has a lot to do with that, especially by positive aspect, heal some more things that they haven't fully been healed. And with Chiron also sextile Saturn to heal them in a more permanent kind of way, in a more complete, committed kind of way than we have before. And not only are these conversations, if we can do them differently, going to help us to heal, but they're also going to help us too as well to formulate not only a different way of thinking, but Aries, a different way of being, a different way of doing, a different way of expressing our identity of who we are, to match this new way of thinking, a different way of being and doing that is more flexible, that is more fun, that is more lighthearted, that's not always looking over its shoulder thinking someone's gonna creep up on it all the time. It's gonna forge our way as well into a different way of being, because thinking a lot of times defines our actions. How we think defines a lot of other things about our lives, especially now. So this new perspective is going to help us do things differently and be different and better in order to what? Step into a new, different, and better chapter in life. How can you step into a new, better, and different chapter in life, which that last solar eclipse in Sagittarius was about? If you're still doing things according to the old way, if you're still thinking according to the old way, believing things according, you can't. And this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini saying, come on here, there's been a new chapter in life that's been trying to come here for so long, and there've been a lot of struggles. Now let's get with it. Let's get the mind, body, spirit. Especially with the Neptune squaring this, let's get the mind, body, spirit on the same page. New chapter here. What do you need to make it happen? Go for it. Fix these old things. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Gemini is like, I'm bored. Gemini is a sign that loves to learn, that has so many interests. Is like, I'm bored with this old stuff. I'm bored with this old chapter. I'm bored with these old problems. I'm bored with all these fears and insecurities. I'm bored with all this self-sabotage. Let's go. Fix these old things. In a non-emotional way, fix them and be done with them and get the closure, and let's drive into the sunset, you know, together, because things are good. Things are good or getting good. Even if it's been hard for that to register, things are good and getting good. Even if it's been hard to register, and this new moon solar eclipse is helping it to register, saying, look here, things in life are really are changing in a different way, and you're still dealing with this old mindset. What is that? What is that? Get with it. Let's learn now. Let's learn. Gemini, Sagittarius are a lot about education. Let's learn now that, let's learn a new way of being here and go for it. Okay. And I think it's going to help, and it's going to help us to commit, because the new moon is solar eclipse is also trine Saturn. It's going to help us to commit more fully to the new life, the new perspective, and to bringing more things together as we move on. Okay. So I think that's it. Oh, great. I erased my chart. Okay. Anything else I want to add? I'm like, do I need to repeat anything? I mean, I think maybe I will, just because I like to do that. I am a Gemini sun. My birthday's soon, and I have my Gemini sun is conjunct Mercury retrograde. So I'm like, this is my energy. So I'm going to repeat, right? Mercury retrograde likes that. So what do I think, again, is going on at this new moon solar eclipse before I move on to something else? What I think is going on during this time period here is that we're trying to resolve some old conflicts from the past that still haven't been resolved, that are preventing us from more fully embracing a new and better chapter in life. Okay, in order for us to more fully resolve these old conflicts that haven't been resolved, though, what we need that we don't have is a drastically new way of thinking and talking about these old problems that is less judgmental, that is less opinionated, that is less emotional, and that is more flexible and more open and more carefree. That's what we need. But even though we know we need it, we still struggle to adopt this new perspective because we're still very triggered by old things, still very emotional about old things, and still very worried about old things. And what we're going to have to do at this new moon solar eclipse, which I do think we have a lot of support to do, is to calm some of these emotional triggers, put those on the back burner here, and do what needs to be done, or say what needs to be said about these old things in order to resolve them, which may require extreme transparency and about our struggles, and us saying what needs to be said, and working through some of the emotions with more transparency is then going to bring the new perspective, the new way of thinking and communicating that is then going to solve these old problems. It's going to fix them and get them on a much better trajectory so that 2 weeks from now you can get the closure that you need in order to move forward. Okay. And this new perspective as well is also going to bring answers, information, things to light that's been missing. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do now, do I want to give some examples? Yeah, I think I want to give some examples, and then maybe I'll do a metaphor, and then I'll look at your inside degrees and we'll pull a card. But I want to do a few examples of what I think has been going on here. There's one thing, I think there's like 3 different ways I see this can go. The first way I see this can go is that some of you, especially since that full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius 2 weeks ago, have had things from the past, old issues that you needed to resolve. And you'll know if this is you, that hasn't been resolved, and you have been dragging your feet. You've been dragging your feet. You haven't resolved them. You haven't reached out to anyone. You haven't gone back to fix anything. You've been perhaps dragging your feet here because you've been scared because of the past repeating itself, of how these people will respond once you fix these things, of what it's going to mean for your life and what's next and all this stuff, taking everything so seriously. So what could happen here at this new moon, or I think needs to happen here at this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, is if this is you, is that you could then get a drastically new way of thinking about this old problem that needs to be resolved and talking about it, that then gives you the courage and gives you the strength to go to these old things, these old people, a relationship, a boss, you know, a family member, whatever it is for you, to finally start that conversation to fix this old thing and to move it forward. So for some of you, that's what's going on. You've been dragging your feet, and this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is saying, get in gear, talk to the people to fix these old things, you know, and don't take it so seriously, and don't be so hurt about it. And don't worry if it doesn't play out in the way that you thought it would play out. There's other ways it can go that are going to be just as good. Okay. For others of you, if it isn't, some of you like have just avoided altogether fixing old things, which I think there's a huge need to have. I mean, we had 2 eclipses around Mercury retrograde. This is a need. I need to go back. If that doesn't resonate for you, then some of you did go back to an old situation 2 weeks ago around that full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius in order to resolve it. And I think what may have happened for some of you is that you did kind of resolve it, but you didn't really resolve it. You kind of resolved some of it, and then you either stop engaging with that old thing or old person, or you just kind of change the subject, if you will, to something else. And what this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is saying, no, finish the drill. You'll finish what you started. If there's something that from a past conflict or a past issue that hasn't been worked out or was only partially worked out, that now you've kind of stagnated on or dropped the ball, and pick up the conversation to fix the old thing, and pick up the conversation in a drastically different way, with a drastically different way of thinking than you once did in order to fix it. So some of you are getting that. Another group of you, maybe this is the last group that I would see, also did go back around that full moon lunar eclipse in Sagittarius 2 weeks ago to finish old things. You actually did start some kind of conversation, but that conversation didn't go well at all. That conversation or that old way to resolve it didn't go well at all. Maybe some of you have had arguments, maybe some of you had fights, maybe some of you had disagreements over the course of the past 2 weeks. You said some mean things, someone said some mean things to you. And the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini is saying, do it again, do that conversation over, do that argument over, do it over. If you want closure, do it over. If you don't want closure, don't do it. Do it over. Okay, do it differently. Do it over differently. Don't do it over the same way. The same way is going to cause the same argument. Do the same conversation over. Better, more open, more accepting of other people's opinions, of other people's point of views, of whatever way this can be worked out, of all the options that are possible, with less stress, with more lightheartedness, with less emotional attachments to all these old things, with more vulnerability. Do it over. Have the conversation again if you really want the clarity to move forward. Okay. Some of you aren't going to like that. Some of you are going to be like, why should I talk to this person over again who said this to me 2 days ago? Why should I talk to this person over again who did this horrible thing to me 3 months ago? And it's like, you know, they should pay. They need to pay for what they did. And it's like, you know, I'm sure they do, right? I'm sure some people need to pay for things that they do, but that's not conducive to healing, right? That just keeps you stuck and feeling burned and wanting revenge and wanting payback. That is not conducive to healing, especially not now. And Gemini does things very differently than all the other signs, especially Scorpio and Capricorn, which wants people to pay, you know? Do it again, do it better, do it lighter, you know, more open. Sure, some people maybe should pay, but if you really want closure and if you really want answers about a situation, and if you really want to wipe yourself clean, like wipe the slate clean, blank slate, you don't hold resentments towards people. You say your piece, you say what needs to be said, you get the information, you let it go, you move on, okay? That's what needs to be done here. Some of you may not like that message, but it's not the message that's the problem. It's not the message problem. It's your relationship to the message. It's your relationship to Gemini. If this is really hard for some of you, if you're really triggered by what I'm saying, it's not that there's a problem with what I'm saying. It's that you have a problem with Gemini and how Gemini works. Gemini does not hold grudges. Gemini does not hold grudges. Gemini doesn't say, oh, well, you pissed me off, you know, yesterday, so now I'm going to give you the silent treatment and cut you out of my life and not talk to you for 5-10 years. Gemini says, oh, we got in an argument yesterday. I totally forgot about that. You know, I got so distracted. I'm over that now. You know, I'm over this argument we talked about. You know, I was mad at you yesterday. I'm not mad at you anymore. You know, I was mad at you like two weeks ago, but I had some time to think about it and I'm done. I'm over it. You know, like let's work this out better now, you know? So have these old conversations again. because you're going to find that they're going to be easier to resolve now, and that you're going to have a different perspective on it, or that the other people that you're dealing with are going to loosen up their perspective as well. Okay, if some of you aren't dealing, maybe I'll give you a fourth way. If some of you aren't dealing with people at all, but there's an old issue that's just been weighing on your heart that you don't feel like you need to reach out to someone about, and that no one's reaching out to you about as well, because it can go both ways. Sometimes people don't do what they need to do and you end up having to make closure on your own, right? Like sometimes that happens. Then another way to look at this new moon solar eclipse is that, right, if you're not resolving an issue in reality and no one's coming to you, this is time for you to think differently to yourself, for you to think differently to yourself about that old issue, and to get a different perspective, a different way of thinking about the old issue that allows you to move on, that allows you to make sense of what needs to make sense of, and let it go, so that you can be happier, or let other new, better things now come into your life that it is that you need to fully close out one cycle and step into another. So it can be that as well that needs to go on here. But I think it needs to happen, and I think it's good. There's a sense of making peace. There's a sense of this is even though this may be a hard message for some of you, like it means well. Like that's the way I feel about Gemini. A lot of people are really triggered by Gemini, especially because we haven't had a solar eclipse here in 18 years. So people haven't been used to Gemini in this way for 18 years. Even though this is a really triggering message, it means well. That's the way Gemini says the weirdest, the darndest things, but it really does mean well. And I feel like that's what's going on here, is like, it's sure, it's going to be hard to go back to do these old conflicts in a different way, you know, but it means well. And how does it mean well? This is meant to bring, like, this is not a word I typically associate with Gemini, although this solar eclipse is square Neptune and Pisces, and it is what I associate with Pisces, forgiveness, right? Like this new moon in Gemini is meant to bring forgiveness. It's meant to bring compassion. It's meant to bring healing. It's meant to bring letting go, letting bygones be bygones, and move on. So even though this is very triggering, I don't want to go back to talk to someone that wronged me and be whatever, you know, if you can do that, it's going to release you. It's going to release you from like the prison of this old chapter in life and move you forward. Maybe that's a better way of putting it in Gemini terms, especially because Gemini likes its freedom as well. So there's some of that. Yeah. Now I should note too, this can happen in a variety of different parts of your life. This can be romantic relationships or personal relationships. It can be your job stuff. It can be health stuff. This can go in a variety of different ways. You're reviewing old health stuff to get a different perspective on that. You're reviewing old romantic relationships that you need to end or begin you're reviewing old job stuff with the boss that's stagnated, or with the boss that hasn't worked out. These four ways that this can go can be a bunch of different things, you know, relationship, work, health, job. Okay, the point is not really what the old issues are that you're resolving. The point here is that they need another look. They need another look. They need another thought process, or they need another conversation here that hasn't been had or hasn't been done in order to fully shake these things loose, break free from them, and get the closure that you need to accept what is and to move forward. Another thing too that I also really need to stress as well is that Gemini, which I don't think I've said enough, is that Gemini is not only about being open to many possibilities and options and not being so emotional, and about stressing less and about being flexible, but it's also not an opinionated sign. It doesn't hold on to its beliefs that tightly. That's more Sagittarius. Sagittarius is about beliefs. Gemini is the opposite of Sagittarius. It doesn't have much to do with holding belief systems. Not that Gemini doesn't like ideas. Gemini loves ideas. It just doesn't hold on to them, you know, and codify them into codes and systems of behavior and belief like maybe Sagittarius and some of these other signs would. So another thing as well that it means to me, because Gemini is not opinionated, is very open, that there also needs to be, as you're resolving these old conflicts, more open to to other people's perspectives as well, not just to your perspective, but be more open to other people's perspectives and ways of thinking about a situation too. Even if it's not your perspective, even if it's not your way of doing things as well, there needs to be some kind of seeing eye to eye, which is another reason why I should note, like, Gemini has to do with the twins, right? It's symbolized by Castor and Pollux, the brothers. The brothers are not identical twins, they're fraternal, but, and Gemini does have to do with siblings. It rules siblings because of a lot of that. And when you think of, like, brothers, if you will, or sisters, a lot of brothers and sisters, if you have any, are not alike. You're not alike. I'm very different than my sister. We're similar in some ways, but we're also very different. But the idea about brothers and sisters is not that you're the same as your brothers and sisters. It's that you have to get along. You coexist. You're in the same family, you know, and to respect each other's differences. So I think there's also a message for some of you as well as you're going back to resolve these old conflicts with people. It's not just about like stopping being emotional and like letting loose and like whatever, how, you know, like being more flexible about however this needs to work, but it's also about getting common ground with these other people and seeing eye to eye with them, not believing what they believe, not being what they are, you know, if you don't feel called to be that, but just seeing their perspective, because that also is going to make a world of a difference too. Okay. Anything else? Yeah, maybe I'll give you a metaphor before I look at the inside degrees. The thing that came to me is a metaphor about the well, it doesn't have to be the United States Postal Service. It could be like FedEx, could be UPS, but it's about like a postal service, delivering of mail and delivering of packages, because that is a Gemini thing. Gemini has to do with the Postal Service, which ironically was in the news in the United States, like most of last year when the North Node was there before we had an eclipse on it. But Gemini has to do with the Postal Service. Why does Gemini have to do with the Postal Service? Because the Postal Service is out in our communities, talking to people in the community. Another thing that Gemini has to do with is your neighborhood, your community as well. But the reason why I want to use this now, the Postal Service, is because I think what's going on at this time in the astrology is that we are having to go back to the past to deliver messages to these old things about something we didn't tell them before that now needs to be fixed in order to move forward. Like, we're going to deliver messages, or even if you want to think of it in this way, gifts, right? I think gifts come in the mail. To deliver gifts to the past now that we've learned, or to get gifts from the past so that we can move forward. And when you think of the Postal Service, how would it feel? Let me say, if you ran like a postal company, how would it feel if you had like a postman or a postwoman, someone that was supposed to deliver messages and packages, come to you, their boss, and say, no, I don't deliver packages to that part of town. I don't deliver packages to that part of town because I don't like their religious beliefs. I don't deliver packages to that part of town because I don't like how they handled a situation with me a while back. I can't go into that part of town and deliver mail and packages to that person because they looked at me funny once and they said mean things to me and I don't talk to them anymore. How would you feel if you owned the Postal Service and you had a post person that couldn't go into half of the communities, half the neighborhoods, half the streets that you need to deliver messages to? That person would be useless. The person would be useless here because there are messages that need to get across that now can't get across because you're emotional and because you're judgmental and because you're not seeing different perspectives. And so that's why Gemini exists. That's why Gemini exists. Gemini says, I don't care if this person looked at me funny, like whatever. You know, I look at them funny too. It's fine. You know, we're all funny looking, right? Like Gemini's kind of jokey about things, kind of silly. Like, I don't care, you know, they said that to me. Oh, I didn't even realize they were making fun of me. I didn't even realize they're making fun of me, you know, or like, they said this part of town cussed me out the other day. Oh, I've totally forgotten about that by now. You know, like that's kind of a Gemini thing, like not offended, doesn't take anything personally, like kind of silly. Like that's what we need to learn here. We need to learn that, you know, and their belief systems, there's this part of town I deliver mail at, their belief systems, they're kind of like the Postal Service, like they're kind of cool, you know, like I like that belief. Maybe it's not my belief, but like I can learn a lot from it. So I think that maybe that's a weird metaphor to use, but I think that's a lot of what's going on here is that we're having to be more open to different ways of being and different ways of handling hard situations on our part and on other people's part, and more flexible and less offended. So that we can get our messages across to fix these old things, to move them forward and get the full gifts and the blessings of what is about to come to us. Not only that, but one other thing it just came to me about Gemini too is Gemini is a silly sign. Like, it's just silly to me. Gemini has a sense of humor, and really so too does Sagittarius. They to me are the two signs of the zodiac that are really funny, really just goofy, really funny. Oh, my thing's not working. So that's another thing too that we're having to learn, to go back to these old situations too with a sense of humor too, and just be like, oh, did I do that? Did I do that? That was dumb. Whoops, I'm sorry, and to kind of like smooth things over. There's a need to do that because, no one gets out of life alive. So life is kind of funny. And we don't have any rough drafts in life. Like, there's no recital for life. There's no preparation to this lifetime. Like, we're just in life, and this is the only chance we get. And because there is no preparation in life, we're bound to make mistakes and do stuff that's stupid. And Gemini gets that. Like, life is funny. Life is funny. This is weird, right? This is weird here, that we have bodies and that we interact. Especially because Gemini is an air sign and not an earth sign in the body. This is weird that we have bodies and that we disagree and that we, have all these resources that we have to share and things like that. So Gemini also is like kind of goofy about these things as well. And there's a need to have a sense of humor as you go back to deal with these old people. Like, you were really mad at me a few weeks ago, but it's kind of funny. Like, let's move on. So I hope that helps some of you there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the inside degrees. The first one I want to read is actually not going to be the degree of this new moon solar eclipse. It's going to be the one of Aquarius, because Saturn is currently in Aquarius, making a square to Uranus and Taurus all this month. I didn't go into detail about it in this video, but trust me, I included that in my interpretations. So I want to read that, especially because this really stood out to me as being important. So we're going to look at this Saturn, 13 degrees Aquarius. You can look at 12 degrees if you want. I've got that up on the screen. You can look at 14, but I like 13. And that's where Saturn is at this time. Okay, it says this: there is nothing to go back to. The past has become a phantom. You are propelled forward into the great unknown. So what that means to me is that even though we are going back to the past to fix old things, we're not going to get trapped in the past. Right? We're going back to the past to fix old stuff, but it really is gone. It really is gone. And it really is gone. Or if it's not gone, if we're bringing something into our lives from the past, the old patterns are really worn out. The old patterns are really played out and on their way out. Okay. But even though the past is really gone, especially the past few decades of our lives have been hard in the old patterns, even though that is the case, it is so easy to become somewhat desperate and out of context. We are forgetting that. I feel like there's something, I feel like there's something around this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini where we know there's something from the past that needs to be fixed, and where we have to go back to fix them, and where we know that the old life is done. It's over. The old habits and the old patterns, but we don't believe it. We don't believe it. We're taking everything out of context. We're not seeing it for exactly the way things really are. We're not seeing things clearly, especially with Mercury retrograde squared Neptune. We're not seeing things clearly. And it's not that we're not seeing per se deception and lies clearly. I think we're coming out of deception and lie territory. It's that we're not seeing how good things are. We're not seeing how things are improving. That's what we're not seeing clearly here. That's making us very desperate, very emotional. It says so much depends on how you interpret Gemini and Aquarius. They get along. Okay, they're both air signs. So much depends. And the solar eclipse is trining this. So much depends on how you interpret. Gemini has to do with translating words, how you interpret the fact that you are strictly on your own without a personal history or heritage to fall back upon. So to keep bringing it together here, the past is really gone. Okay, we just don't think it is. We just don't think that these old habits and patterns that were really hard for us are gone. And because of that, we're taking everything out of context and we're feeling a bit desperate because we are interpreting everything wrong. And part of the reason why we are interpreting everything wrong and not seeing things clearly is because we do not have a personal history or heritage to fall back upon. The old doesn't work anymore. And because the old doesn't work anymore, I think that's why we're kind of teetering on the edge. You know, old doesn't work. What do I do? Go backwards, forwards? I don't know. So I think there's a lot of that going on as well. Like, part of our dilemma here is because the old is gone and we're afraid to create the new and to do the new, which needs to be done, and in which now we have the boost to do. I mean, another thing about Gemini too is that it is a bit of a it is creative in its own way. You know, creative in the intellect. And again, it's the third sign of the zodiac. Three, I know it's the twins too, but it's the third sign of the zodiac, and threes are creative in numerology. Okay. We need to be okay with creating, more flexible. And part of the key to creation is being flexible, you know, in order to go in the way we need to go. Says this, is this real opportunity or a strange fate? There's this illusion again. Am I really moving forward or am I really falling backwards or what's happening? Very hard to tell the difference. Paradoxical, mixed, ambiguous. Where do we go from here? No easy answers anywhere, even though the answers are right in front of our face, you know? Perhaps the only thing to do is to acknowledge and move with this radical opening and to put no interpretations on it. Assume nothing at all, for if you can welcome multidimensionality with truly open arms, it might well turn out that the future was never supposed to be like the past. It's not. And that becoming so free does provide an open access channel for what needs to happen, to come through, a jump ahead of the last moment, synchronized with evolution beautifully. So what this means to me here, and just to close this out, is that we are going back to old things to resolve them, but we're not seeing how far we've actually come to resolve them, and that the old bad habits and patterns are gone. And because we're not seeing it, we're very emotional, we're very desperate, we're taking things out of context here as well. We're also taking things out of context because we have to create what's next. What's next doesn't exist. And instead of us getting stuck in this confusion and in this desperation and in the old patterns, what we need to do is to acknowledge this weird space that we're in, put no interpretations on it, blank slate, open, silly, flexible, put no interpretations on it, assume nothing at all. Also, to me, feels, I know Aquarius, but also Gemini, and just jump in with open arms to a different experience and go with the wind wherever the wind blows. Go with the flow with these air signs, because it might turn out here that when you go with the flow, what needs to happen is going to jump through at the last moment, just when you need it, which it is, solar eclipse, sun conjunct Mercury, which it is. It also is too because of the degree of the new moon. Let's look at that. New moon, solar eclipse. Surprises, destiny shocks, stunning events present a way to evolve rapidly for the daring and the wild. Whatever you assume and prepare for, the moment shall be different, but I think better. Nothing is meant to be straightforward here. You must be kept on the alert. Another thing, beguiled, tricked. It's like the Mercury retrograde, the confusion, anything to help you leap off. So, you know, I'm telling you, once we get this different way of thinking that's more flexible, that doesn't need all this old stuff to cling to, and that just goes with the flow, good things are going to happen. Surprising destiny shocks here to help us move forward. Okay. And perhaps all this emotion, right? And all this emotion and all this confusion is to help us take the leap, Because if we knew what was going to happen, when we resolve these situations, like, we wouldn't have to build the strength up and the courage up to do it. So I don't know, there's something else coming through here that not only, like, do we need to become very open and a blank slate to whatever needs to happen next and accepting of it, but that not knowing what's next is the key, is the catalyst to get us to do that, to bring all these things together. You know, look, the greater self finds its way to get the little self who wants to hide in safe places, you know, when instead a much larger destiny is in the works. Yeah, so many things I could say about this solar eclipse. I think I'm getting kind of long now, but Yeah. You know, because another thing too that this reminded me of, right, is like having these conversations with people is not safe. It doesn't feel safe, especially not with these planets in Cancer. But the whole point is not to feel safe. The whole point is that this doesn't feel safe, right? Like that's Gemini. Gemini loves to do things it's never done before. It loves to try new things. Like that's another thing that we're really having to become more comfortable with, I think, at this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, is to not need to feel safe, to not have every answer planned out ahead of time, to not know what's going to happen next, and to be okay with that, and for everything not to be perfect, right? I really think that's what we're trying to learn here. Now your card for this time period is this one. Okay. We've got, wow, how perfect. It's the 8. It's the 8 of Swords upright. This deck is kind of hard to see, but you can see the woman with the 2 swords around her. What is this about? Blocked perspectives. Blocked perspectives, which is like the whole point of this new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. Some of you are not seeing your situation clearly. Some of you are not seeing your situation for what it really is. And not because the situation's bad, and not because the situation's complicated, because the situation is more simple than you're making it seem. Okay, and is less stressful than you're making it seem, because the situation is more wiggle room than you're making it seem, you know, and is more silly than you're making it seem. So this is indicating a lot of you have blocked perspectives that are really preventing you from fixing some things that it is that you need. And there's a need to remove the blindfold that you have over your own self and your own life and whatever's going on here, and to step away from all this like unnecessary conflict. You know, like that's another thing that I feel about Gemini, is like Gemini is a sign that's like, there's no need for conflict. If everyone just saw each other's point of view, even if we didn't really agree, there's no point for conflict, right? Like people can be different and still get along, you know? So there's a lot of that. Like there's a need to stop blinding yourself to the simplicity of the moment and to the adventure and the excitement of the moment, and to thinking things that aren't helpful here. There's also too another thing that this made me think of too, because the swords are in front of her, is that some of you are being very defensive, and Venus and Mars in Cancer during the solar eclipse can make you that way. Some of you are not saying what needs to be said, not only because your perspective is too stiff and too tough, but some of you are not fixing these old things because you're trying to protect yourself, you know, and good things don't come, like progress doesn't come from comfort zones, you know. There's a need to come out of your comfort zone in order to move forward. And that's a Gemini thing. Gemini says, come on, like let's get out of our comfort. And we don't have to go too far from the comfort zone. All right, we don't have to go too far from it, but you need to get out of it at least a little bit more. So I think some of you have too many walls up, too many boundaries, still playing it too safe. You need to come out of it. If this sounds like a message very familiar to what I said in February of this year at that new moon in Aquarius, it's because it kind of is, right? At that new moon in Aquarius, Saturn was square Uranus, it's back again. So some of you still got walls up that need to come down. And it's that wall, and it's that need for self-preservation and protection that's causing your issue. Because when you're trying to protect yourself, and when everyone's a threat and when everyone's an enemy, you can't have real conversations with people. You can only act out of fear. So stop trying so hard to protect yourself. You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You know, you're going to be fine. And the things that are going to come hurt you now for this next chapter of life are not the same threats you've seen before. They're going to be different. So there's no point in protecting yourself from something old. You're protecting yourself from these old things that happened, because the old things are not going to happen again. It's a new threat. It's a new threat now. You need to learn a different way of protect, which is a learning curve. It's going to take time. So let these walls down so that you can figure out what kind of new beast you're dealing with from here on out. The card at the bottom of the deck is the Hierophant reversed. The Hierophant, ooh, love this card so much, because this to me is very Sagittarius when it's upright, but it's reversed, so it's like Gemini in some way. I know some people think this is Taurus or whatever. I think this is Sagittarius. So what does this indicate? This to me is like, let go of everything you thought you knew. Some of you need to part of the problem is that you're holding on to old beliefs. Let go of everything you thought you knew in order to resolve these old things, because that's going to be what is going to help you move forward. because the future is not like the past, and to read the past into the future is inaccurate. You're going to draw a lot of incorrect conclusions. You're going to draw a lot of incorrect conclusions and assumptions if you keep thinking what's next is like what it was. It's not. And you need to realize that, right? The solar eclipse, Gemini, come on. Another thing too, the Hierophant, when it's reversed, is about going a non-traditional route, or doing things in a unique and unconventional kind of way. So another thing that's going on here is that not only may some of you be having really blocked belief systems because you're holding true to old beliefs that no longer apply anymore, but because some of you are being too rigid here and trying to do things in a more traditional kind of way. And Gemini is not a traditional sign. Okay, especially now when Saturn's in Aquarius, which has to do with Uranus ruled doing things differently. So let go of the old beliefs, let go of everything you once knew, and stop trying to do things like you once would in a traditional way. Do things differently. Come up with unique solutions. Do things weird. Do things out of the blue, out of the ordinary, strange, because that's going to help you move forward. Not only that, but the Hierophant reversed is also about listening to your own opinions over everyone else's. You know, maybe some of you are getting bad advice, right, from other people about these old things, about what's going on. And maybe some of you really need to hear that. Someone's giving you bad advice. Listen to your own advice. To thine own self be true here with the Aquarius. Listen to yourself. What does your heart say? What does your soul say? What does it really want in the end without all these emotions, without all these defense mechanisms? You know, follow your own path and follow your own truth. Even if it's weird, because that ultimately is what is going to bring you the success in the end. Okay, we've got the Queen of Swords reversed next. Man, this is about some of you being too cold, too tough, which I feel is definitely going on, or too soft and too emotional. And I think this is actually the key here. Some of you are being too tough, too cold, too closed down, or too offended and triggered by everything, which is really blocking resolution, really blocking answers from coming, really blocking progress, really blocking growth, really blocking your perspective. And the way to get out of the too triggered or too cold is to drop everything you thought you knew about yourself, about your life, and formulate totally different beliefs, and to go your own path, go your own way, do things uniquely and weirdly, and not take anyone's advice that doesn't resonate with you fully in the ways that you need. Okay, so that's what I'm going to say there. I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you on the next video. If you like this video, please like it on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends. I'll talk to you later.